first in the morning. As you've seen, the theme of the session is early school living between analysis of the phenomenon and projects aimed at countering it. I'm chairing the session. I'm Emanuele Provolini. The rules of the game are quite simple. The presenters will have about 20 minutes for each presentation, and then we have 10 minutes question for each paper. We have 3 papers. So that will leave us more or less with half an hour at the end to have an overall discussion on the papers, on future potential research on the topic, both on the measurement side and the evaluation of experiences. So as you've seen in the program, we start with the first paper right away. The title is Short-Term Effects of an Education Savings Program to Tackle School Dropouts. Davide Azzolini and Loris Bergolini are the authors of the paper, and I think, if I'm not wrong, that Davide is going to present it, and Loris is going to say how marvelous this paper is. Anyway, so he presents, he's going to answer questions, so he's got the easy part.
Yeah, it's going to be easy. I guess I go. So first of all, good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to present to you today is preliminary results of an evaluation study that is currently in progress in Italy. It is about an education saving program aimed at reducing school dropout. So I'm going to give you a short background of this paper. So as you might already know, Italy ranks pretty bad in terms of early school leaving in Europe. And we also know that early school leaving, school dropout, are typically associated with the usual suspects like family socioeconomic background, gender, and migration background. For our interest, we know that youth from lower socioeconomic background tend to have higher risk of dropping out from school and to attain lower levels of education credentials. We also know from literature on social inequality in education that there are 2 main mechanisms that can account for these social disparities in educational attainment. Here the story is quite long and complex, but to make it short, we have one channel which is financial or economic factors. So children from less wealthy families have financial constraints to pay for education, to pay for direct costs and indirect costs of education. And the second channel is about parental expectation. So on top of financial constraints, parents from lower social background develop from the very first years lower educational expectations. So they expect their children to attain lower levels of education because they are less confident, for example, about the probability that they get through the whole educational process. So what we do, we investigate the potential in this study. We investigate the potential of a comprehensive program that aims at tackling both these mechanisms of social inequality in education. And the program that I'm going to evaluate in this study is, it belongs to so-called family of programs of match savings programs. So what they are, in a nutshell, is it is programs that are targeted to low-income families with children, and they give these families access to a dedicated savings account. With that account, families are kind of incentivized to save regularly some money that is dedicated to the education of their children. And on top of the account, there is a match rate, which is a sort of multiplier of the savings. So if you save €1, you get €4 back, for example, from the program, if you spend that money on education, right? And typically you can spend money on tuition fees, you can spend money on transportation, meals, or whatever is connected to education. Here the logic is that you incentivize programs, families to save, and if they save, you multiply the savings by a factor of, which is variable across programs, for example, 4, right? So, another key feature is that these programs start early, typically at the age of when children are born or are in the very first years of life. So by developing sort of this behavior of savings in the long run, these programs are meant to not only to develop assets, so financial assets in the long term that can be spent, for example, in tertiary education, but also to develop sort of commitment of the family and to foster their educational expectation and their parenting across the several years of education before tertiary education, so from the very first years of schools of children. And here I said the promise of net savings programs, because these are kind of new programs, so there is growing experimental evidence backing these programs and showing that these programs are effective in enhancing families' savings behavior for education and also improving some short-term educational outcomes such as grades or achievements or motivation. But the evidence is still, so to say, in the making, and it is most importantly is confined to specific contexts, typically the United States of America. So this is why we think that the will policy demonstration, the one that I'm talking about today, I think it's important not only for the Italian context, but also for the literature on net savings programs in general. And will is a policy experimentation that is funded by Con i Bambini. It is run from 2019 to 2025, and it's fielded in 4 cities: Firenze, Cagliari, Teramo, and Torino. So basically, what we do within this policy demonstration is to implement a match savings program and to evaluate it through a randomized control trial. So the program has 2 main components. So the savings account, families that enter the program are asked to save from €1 to €6 every week for a period of 4 years. And these families, I didn't say, they are low-income families and have children enrolled in the last year of primary school, okay, when they start the program. So if they save, they can, after the 4 years, they can accumulate €1,000 if they exploit their savings capacity to its maximum, right? And the program provides a 4-to-1 match rate. So the program gives families €4,000 back if they save €1,000. And that money can be spent only for allowed educational expenses. And I will provide you with more details in the future, in the next slide. So that money can be spent when children are basically enrolled in scuola media or scuola superiore, right? So in the 4 years after enrolling in the program. In addition to this financial component mechanism, the program also provides additional services that are dedicated financial education, educational support, and guidance for students. So this is basically the theory of change of this program. So if you are within WILL program, so you are expected to save more for education. That should lead the family to be more capable of spending money for educational purposes. And that should theoretically be linked with improved school performance. And in the long run, aid school degree completion, so non-dropping out. The second channel is that through savings, family also develop better and more positive or higher expectation and aspirations for the future educational attainment of their children. And that should also be translated into improved school performance and in the long run, it should also contribute to higher chances of completing Scuola Superiore. So practically what we did is, this is the timeline of the study. So we recruited parents and children in 2019 when they were enrolled in the last year of primary school. They filled out an application form giving us a bunch of data about their background, and we randomized them, right? I skip the details here, but we allocated basically all enrolled students into two groups. One treatment group that had access to the program that I briefly described before, and the control group that received so-called business as usual. Basically, they didn't receive access to the program. So there is a data collection plan. So we have a follow-up survey fielded in spring 2021, one other which is currently right now ongoing, and then we have a last one planned for 2024 or 15 or 25. So today I'm gonna present to you the results of the first of these follow-up surveys. And this flow chart just shows you the flows of students that enter the study first, and then the different phases of the study. So at first we recruited 576 students, and we randomized them. So just a few data to let you understand what kind of students they are. So the average ISEE is less than 6,000 euros, so it's pretty low. 8 out of 10 families live in material deprivation. 8 out of 10 have low educated parents, so less than high school. And half of them are children of immigrants. So we are working with socioeconomically deprived sample of families in the 4 areas. Not all of them reply to the follow-up survey, which is key for us, but we have I would say a decent response rate, which is about 80%, with a relatively limited differential attrition. So the difference in the response rate between the treated and the control students is limited, which is good for us. So a few data about the implementation. So it was a success, although it was difficult. Maybe we have time to discuss it later, because everything happened in the pandemic, and it wasn't planned, right? But at least the financial mechanism worked well. So basically, everyone who was allocated to the treatment group managed to start saving. They saved on average €5 a week, and in total they accumulated on average 400 euros, up to, I think these data are updated in early 21. It's interesting to see that when we split the sample in richer and less richer families, remember on average they are pretty poor, we see that those that are less poor save much more, right? This is a point of criticism in this kind of programs. They save more, and so they can spend more, okay? This graph shows you the evolution of the expenditures made by families. It's interesting to see that it wasn't foreseen before, but at first they spent money for books, transportations, or sport activities in most cases. But when schools were closed down because of, they started immediately spending money for internet connection and computers, okay? Which is good. It shows you, I mean, the flexibility of a program that can adapt to different needs and different times. So the effects. Now I show you this treated control differences on a set of outcomes that we collected in the first follow-up survey, so spring 2021. And these are the effects on saving behaviors and material deprivation. So the message here is that the program increased by 25% the families that declare to save for their children. And importantly, we don't detect any side effect on material deprivation. So one criticism that we get from towards this kind of mechanism is that you kind of force poor family to save and not to spend money for contingent needs, so for daily basic needs. So you might be worried that maybe they skip buying meals for the children, or they don't pay the rent or so, and things like that, but it didn't happen. Based on the data, it didn't happen. So they saved more without having side effect on material hardship. And we find strong positive effects on the educational technology availability of students. So those in the treatment group have a much higher likelihood of having a dedicated PC or tablet during remote learning periods. They also have better internet connection at home, all right? We don't see so we see an increase in savings, we see better educational technologies, we don't see basically any effect on the indicators of school performance that we have. So we ask about grades, we ask about skipping classes, we ask about, what is it called? Come si chiama? Anyway, I don't remember. In any case, we don't find any effect on the indicators of school performance that we have, but possibly an effect on regularity that can be due to retention. So it is very preliminary, but we see, and we need to check it further, but we see that those in the treatment group are more likely to be on the grade that they should attain. So that in that case, it should be second year of scuola media. We don't see any effect on parental expectation, nor on parenting. But when we split, again, the sample into two groups, so below and above the median ISEE of the sample, we see that those families with lower socioeconomic conditions, they experience, thanks to the program, a sharp increase in their aspirations and expectations. So families in the treatment group are more confident that their children, that their child in the program will actually be able to complete high school. It's not completing high school, it's parents' belief that they will complete high school. Okay? It's too early to observe such an outcome. So to summarize, this is basically the theory of change graph that I showed you earlier with some comments about the results. So we'll manage to increase families' savings for education. I mean, and it did not, without harming their material well-being. This is not to be taken for granted. I mean, families, low-income families could not be in the position to save, could not be capable of savings in theory, but through this program, through this dedicated savings account, they managed to save without any short-term consequences on their well-being. They managed to give their children better technologies to attend remote schooling. And among those with low income, among families with particularly low income levels, we also see a sharp increase in their expectation that the children will complete high school. For the moment, we don't see all this reflecting into better school outcomes, but this is going to be the major focus of the current survey that is currently fielded, where we will look at the final grade at the end of Scuola Media. We will look at the regularity of the school career and the high school track choice. Of course, all this in theory should lead to less dropout and higher chances to complete high school in the long run. So without repeating myself, yeah, just a comment maybe on why we don't find effects on school outcomes. Maybe it's too early to see changes on these outcomes. We'll see with the next waves of our surveys. But maybe also COVID played a role here, especially because it really hampered the program's capacity to implement the other services that I mentioned, like student guidance, student support, and financial education. These kind of services were really reduced to a minimum because of COVID. So what we are observing so far is basically only the effect of this savings account. Thank you.